It all starts with the feelings, with a drop of blood falling on your face. When it's in blood, it means, you have changed, you just put on a mask and become different. They say that the feeling of love is one of the strongest, but it is multiplied if you love to kill. I'll start from the beginning. My name is Matt. When I was 7 years old, my only friends Leon and Oscar and I used to play in an abandoned candy bar factory. Our parents wouldn't let us play there, but we would go there in secret. I was the oldest in our trio. Oscar is a sweet tooth, movie buff, and anime geek. He loves sweets and buys them all the time. Even though he eats sweets like a termite tree, he is surprisingly thin. Constantly carries a mini candy. He loves sci-fi and horror movies. Can sit and watch soap operas or movies all day long. Although at this age it is difficult to understand the meaning of many movies, but, despite this, he kept watching. Okay, he would just watch, so he tries to copy the characters, their gaits, motions, character, etc. so his native character is always changing. His main trick is to repeat character quotes. And it doesn't matter whether the character is bad or good. Leon is a gamer and a music lover. He is not a nerd, he likes to play board games and children's games more. He rarely plays the computer and then reluctantly listens to any music, in any genre. He likes to be offended just like a girl. He is a very impressionable boy. Any story makes him marvel and believe it, even if it is fictional. When he is bored or very cheerful, he starts humming a song. One dark night my parents quarreled as usual and my father started beating my mother, and if I hadn't run away, he would have taken to me. I left home and called my friends. We got together at the playground. And the devil dared me to suggest we go to the factory. That's where the big change in our lives happened. We were not stopped by the black vans outside the factory, but only made us even more eager to sneak in. We made our way to the lowest floor and hid behind grates. There we saw people in strict black suits and white masks. All were monotonous except one, a pumped-up big man in a bone-headed helmet with black glass in his eye sockets. His bare torso was covered in countless tattoos. Dozens of hieroglyphs were burned into his helmet skull. A vertical inscription on his back along his spine stood out, murderous. With one movement of his hand, men in casual clothes appeared in our view. We didn't start to walk away. We became curious as to what they were doing here. Hooks and chains began to be thrown over the overhead beam, and clothes were torn off the bound people. Before our eyes they hung a girl from a hook by the skin on her back like a pig in a slaughterhouse. A hunting knife gleamed in the hands of a big man. He walked over to the girl suspended and began to slowly peel off the skin on her breasts. He did it so carefully and beautifully that I couldn't look away. It was like it was some kind of art, and it became colorful after the cascade of blood. The tender body was defiled. It was the first time I had ever seen such a thing. My friends then began privately crying and clamping their hands over their mouths. We could have run away then, but we didn't. Why not? The other victims were similarly stripped and hung from hooks, but they didn't cut off their skin. The masked men took saws and tourniquets out of their bags. They placed the tourniquets at hip level and wiped the saws with a rag. Raising the legs of the victims, the masked men drew a circular marking at kneecap level, and their partners brought the saw up. In an instant, everyone with the saws began sawing their knees at once. The tune of amputation began to play throughout the lower floor. Blood began pouring out in torrents and filling the entire floor. It began coming toward us. Out of fear and shock, the three of us began to back away. I thought of nothing but blood and killing. Our heads began to fill with darkness and brutality. Once again, as I moved my hand back, I felt the artificial skin. When I looked, I saw white shoes. At that moment, I wanted to be home in bed, though battered by my own father, but still home, safe from the horrors of this place. I didn't look up right away, but looked back at Oscar and Matt. They were looking at the man above me in tears. I slowly looked up and saw a black mask with a white smile painted on it looking at me. He was wearing an off-white suit and a cylindrical hat of incredible length. In all white, only the painted smile and the crescent-shaped black eyes were the color of night. I heard footsteps behind him. They were carrying the next batch of victims. There were so many masked men that they swarmed the entire corridor. We had no escape route. All we could do was cry and beg for mercy. Who do we have here? Naughty boys. With all his height and his hat, he squatted down. Did you know it's dangerous to walk at night? Especially in places like this. Leon began to shake his head slowly in different directions. The dark-faced man turned on him, and at that time I decided to run away. I could only run to the scene of the cutting. So as not to see the whole nightmare, I looked only under my feet. I was sure everyone turned around at me and looked at my little escape with a smile. They knew I couldn't escape. As I ran, I could see the boots in my side eye. At that moment, the thing I feared most at that moment happened. I hit one of the rippers at full speed. I fell into a bloody puddle from the violent collision, and the blood began to soak into my clothes. I looked up and saw the big guy. Up close, he was like a mountain, painted with frost. Why, of all the enemies present, was it the scariest one I faced? A huge hand, covered in blood, began to reach for me. It lifted me by the scruff of my neck like a puppy. I was at the level of his face, and through the black glass in his eye socket, stared at my pitiful reflection. Tartarus. Let the baby go, said the dark-faced man, leading his weeping friends under his arm. You have frightened him. The man with the long hat was in charge of their company. The big man lowered me to the scarlet floor as ordered. My friends ran up to me and we found ourselves in the middle of this whole crime syndicate. What are we going to do with you little bars? Asked the dark-faced one, squatting down. Kill? Sell? Serve for breakfast to the pigs? We can't let you go. At that moment, the black mask stared at us without looking away. He was thinking, wondering what to do with us. Give me the knife. A voice came from beneath the mask. He called for one of us as soon as the knife was served, but we could not take a step in his direction out of sheer terror. Runner, come to me. My body froze, and my heart began to race faster at those words. Come. Do I have to beg you? Tartarus, if he doesn't come to me now, do to him what you did to these prisoners. In an instant I had a picture of the horror, and I ran toward the dark-faced man. As I ran up, I stumbled and fell face first into the ocean of blood, right in front of him. At that moment I was hysterical, and my consciousness wanted to disappear. I would have screamed at the top of my lungs if not for the intense pressure of the nightmare that would have befallen me. If I had let out a loud squeal, they would have trampled me immediately into the warm wetness. When I looked up, I saw an open palm in front of me with a knife on it. Bar. Do you know who the creator is? I didn't know who it was at the time, so I shook my head. A creator is someone who can create something new. Someone whose imagination goes in the right direction. Do you want to be a creator? I didn't know what to answer, and the man, realizing this, laughed. He took me in his arms, not shy of soiling his snow-white suit. He lifted me up to the newly suspended girl and handed me a knife. For me personally, they lowered the victim down. They put her on her knees, as I could barely reach her stomach. They tied her legs beforehand so she wouldn't kick. Cut. He said, and suddenly, at this word, the victim woke up and began to look around anxiously and shout out an apology. Her mouth was not covered for some reason. She looked at me and chanted for me to drop the knife. My head was flooded with memories of my parents fighting and yelling at each other. Out of anger, I only clutched the knife with both hands. Cut it, kid. A creator can create and take away. You are the creator, so create the world on her body. The colors will be the blood. Create a world where there's nothing you don't want. A world with lots of toys and sweets. Paint it on her body. Use your imagination, little boy. The canvas of the world will be her velvet body. Paint your fantasy on the canvas. I slowly began to thrust the knife toward the body. The victim's screams became a smear of matte. When the knife made a small cut and a drop of blood fell to its warm kin, The girl began to swear at me and try to hit any part of my body. "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of your fantasy," said the dark-faced man and put his hand on my shoulder. In that moment, the fear receded and I felt supported. I used to get that feeling when my father helped me with something. But when the environment began to creep back into me, the fear returned. "You can do it. I believe in you." I wouldn't have been able to kill then, if it hadn't been for the girl spitting in my face and the laughs of the masked men. With intense resentment and rage, I stuck the knife in my stomach. The anger did not cool down in me and I closed my eyes and began to swing the knife across my body. Then there was only darkness. It was as if I were blind, but the words of the man in the mask rang in my head. "Paint your world? Imagine it was a canvas and I was an artist." The more I thought about it, the easier it became. Even though my eyes were closed, I could still see the world. A beautiful, sweet world without quarrels or other problems. Fantasizing, I could. When I opened my eyes, everything was covered in blood. My feet stood in the middle of the victim's draining organs. Blood. Blood. There was blood and guts everywhere. In front of me was a picture of horror, of which I was the creator. That was the last time I felt fear. "Bravo!" shouted the warden in the hat and started clapping his hands. Everyone else began to repeat after him, except for the stern big man. He just looked at me with his arms crossed. Did he realize then that I had changed? "You're doing great, little man. I like you a lot. I hope you like the picture you made." I shook my head slowly in response. I am not in a position to refuse. "Excellent. Hook up the other victims. We have a budding artist here. Art must not be lost, so let's help the boy." The fear was gone. It had died out in me, as well as adequacy. I was more worried about something else. What would I tell my parents when I got home? Where had the blood come from? Whose was it? A strapped and beaten man was kneeling before me. I was able to create my world on a human body. I felt like a creator. God created the world, through fantasy. So I am equal to God. The second time would be easier and, unfortunately, not as delightful as the first. My first murder I will never forget. As soon as the knife touched the victim's body, I heard Leon's impressed voice. "Should I? Can I try it?" Everyone present looked at him. There was admiration on his face. He was impressed by the words of the dark mask. He believed his words and now he wants to try it. Somehow, I'm not surprised. "Of course you can, kid. Give the little recruit a knife." He was given the knife and the hatter led him to the victim. Then, he looked at Oscar and asked, "Would you like to try it? Your friends like it, so you'll like it." Oscar looked at us and reached for the black mask with his pen. He was given a knife and proceeded to carve, as we did. "Do you like it?" asked the warden. "Yes," we shouted, and in an instant our lives changed. Changed for the better. I began to think and think differently. It was as if new feelings and new consciousness came over me. I began to change. My fear of my father disappeared. My aversion to abominable things did not arise. One thing bothered me. I was burning with the desire to create new drawings on people, or rather on their corpses. After such a show, a new friend gave us the clothes of dead peers and let us go home. He said that if we told anyone, we would end up instead of the cattle. I'll be honest, I enjoyed taking lives and drawing death in blood. A couple of days later, as we were playing in the yard, a black van pulled up. The side door swung open and we saw a new friend. He called us over and asked, "Would you like to play with the inmate men again?" "Play? I love to play. Especially with organs." Clapping his hands, an excited Leon answered. Oscar and I agreed too, and then he showed me the automatons and a set of soldiers in a box. "These are yours if you play with the victims. A gift from me and the dead children of those parents you killed tonight. We enjoyed gutting people tonight, because we would get toys for it. Lots of toys. After all, children are the easiest to bribe." A month passed. During that time we went many times, almost every day. I could boast to my friends that I learned how to cut out organs, figurines and burn different drawings on people. Leon liked to cut along the intestine, put it on a steamroller and hummed the song by Leps, "I'll Go Live in London." From the outside it looked as if the gut came to life and started going in circles. Oscar sometimes doused people alive with wax, as in the movie House of Wax. When he was in a bad mood, he saw different limbs of different people and attached them to each other, thus creating a friend. That's what he started doing after the movie May. We had fun and had a good time. We were happy in those moments. One day, the masked friend hugged the three of us and said, "You can always count on me. During this time you have become like children to me, and I have become like a daddy to you. You can come to me anytime. You are always welcome. I want to see you more often." That same night I found my parents dead. Oscar and Leon's parents had also been brutally murdered. I cried for a long time from the loss, but at the same time I was glad that now Mom and Dad would not fight. The police hadn't found the killer. We were going to be taken away by relatives, but they started disappearing in mysterious ways. Everyone who wanted to take us in was gone. So we weren't thought to be taken in by relatives. They said it was a curse and that we were disease carriers. But I realized that I knew this curse in a hat and a mask. A couple of days later, a girl came in. Her name was Liliana, and she was 23 years old at the time. Not only did she have a beautiful name, but she also had an attractive appearance, loose white hair down to her waist, seductive green eyes, a velvet voice, and a delightful body. I remember our first private conversation. "Hello, boys. I am your new mother now. And you must address me only as such, or I will punish you," she said with an adorable smile on her face, and her eyes lit up with sparks, just like my friends do when they gut people. "Something's not right here. I'm taking you from here to your new home today. There's hot tea with sweets and lots of toys waiting for us at home." "Yay!" Oscar and Leon shouted in one voice. They immediately rushed to the girl and dug into her large and firm breasts. These two always fell for sweets and toys. "I also have red paint and lots of canvases at home. What do you say, Matty the Seventh Flower? Are you excited? Do you want to paint a new world? A world where you are the creator?" She knew not only our weaknesses, but also our big secret. How? Perhaps she was one of those people in masks. She lived outside the city, far from people. Her allies of solitude were a tall fence and a pack of fierce dogs. The light in the house was off, but when we walked in, a man turned it on. As we turned around, we saw the dark-faced man. He called out to us with open arms. Oscar and Leon ran to him with joyful squeals and threw themselves into his sweet embrace. And I had at that moment a picture of the event with our parents confirmed. He was the one who killed them. He was the one who murdered those closest to him. And we meet this murderer with joy. I wonder if we have any relevance for our parents left in us. I am your new father, and you are my new sons. I know you're very happy, because now we're going to spend more time together. Your mom and I love you very much, and we will never, ever give you up. Matt. Why are you standing there like a post? Come give your daddy a hug. My new mom pushed me towards my dad. I realized that I had nowhere to go but to accept my new family, and I couldn't throw my friends into the jaws of this monster. Especially now I can do my favorite painting all day long. I'll be able to spend more time creating a beautiful world. I like this arrangement. These thoughts put a smile on my face, and I went into the arms of the masked and hat-wearing monster. It's not such a bad family. Now I look forward to entertaining my captives. Burning with a flame of pleasure, for this is only the beginning.